You ever met someone so entitled, so convinced the world revolves around them, that they try to control things that have nothing to do with them? Well, let me introduce you to HOA Karen, a woman who thought she could boss around an entire farm just because she didn't like the way it looked. But as you'll see, karma had other plans. This is a story about rules, complaints, and one very persistent woman learning the hard way that farms don't answer to HOAs. It all goes down in a quiet countryside neighborhood where most people enjoy the open space, fresh air, and peaceful surroundings. Most people, except Karen. Karen lived in a fancy HOA-controlled community right next to a farm, and she absolutely hated that farm. The animals, the smell, the sight of it all drove her nuts. She saw it as an eyesore, something that didn't belong next to her perfectly maintained neighborhood. But instead of just closing her blinds and moving on with her life, Karen did what Karens do best. She made it her mission to get rid of the farm. At first, she just complained. To her neighbors, to the HOA board, to anyone who would listen. But when that didn't work, she took things to the next level. And that's when things got interesting. The farm itself was exactly what you'd picture. Rolling fields, a big red barn, and a long dirt driveway leading up to a house that had probably been there for generations. There were animals, too. Cows, chickens, goats, all living their best farm life. And the owner? A middle-aged guy named Tom, who had been running the place for years. He was one of those no-nonsense, straight-talking types. Friendly, but not the kind of person who put up with drama. He had work to do, and didn't have time for petty neighborhood squabbles. But Karen didn't see it as a farm. She saw it as a problem. The smell of fresh manure, the sound of roosters crowing in the morning, the occasional tractor rolling by. She hated all of it. She had moved into this HOA-controlled community for peace, quiet, and perfectly trimmed lawns. And in her mind, this farm was ruining the whole aesthetic. Never mind that the farm had been there long before her neighborhood was even built. Karen believed that her property value was more important than some dirty farm. At first, it was just complaints. She whined to anyone who would listen. Neighbors, HOA board members, even the mailman. It's disgusting. The animals are loud. The smell is unbearable. How is this even allowed? But when no one else seemed as outraged as she was, she decided to handle it herself. One day, she stormed over to the farm, arms crossed, ready to lay down the law. Tom was out front fixing a fence when she marched up, her expression pure Karen-level disapproval. "You can't have that many animals here," she snapped, pointing dramatically at a group of goats minding their own business. Tom barely looked up from his work. "Lady," he said, wiping sweat off his forehead, "it's a farm." Karen didn't like that answer, so she went over his head, except there was no head to go over. She stormed into an HOA meeting, demanding action, but the board just blinked at her. "Karen, the farm isn't part of the HOA. We don't control it." That only made her more determined. If the HOA wouldn't handle it, then surely the city would. She called in an official complaint about illegal livestock and health violations. A few days later, an inspector actually showed up, clipboard in hand, ready to investigate. But after looking around, checking paperwork, and talking to Tom, he had one thing to say. "Everything here is legal. There's nothing to report." Karen was furious. She had been so sure the farm was breaking some kind of rule, and now she looked like a fool. But instead of dropping it, she decided to take things even further. And that's when things started getting messy. Karen was convinced that she had finally found a way to get rid of the farm once and for all. The HOA ignored her. The city wouldn't do anything, but surely the police would take her side. In her mind, the farm was some kind of health hazard, an illegal operation ruining her perfect neighborhood. So, with the confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences, she grabbed her phone and called the cops. She reported illegal livestock and unsanitary conditions. She made it sound like the farm was some kind of disease-ridden wasteland, as if the animals were running wild through the streets, spreading filth. And once she hung up, she sat back and smiled, fully expecting that within the hour, officers would be hauling away chickens and shutting the whole place down. And then, the moment she had been waiting for, a police car pulled up. 2 officers stepped out, scanning the area, clearly wondering why they were called to a farm in the first place. Before they even had a chance to say anything, Karen rushed out of her house, arms waving like she was in the middle of a full-blown emergency. There! Look at all those animals! They're violating all sorts of laws!" she screeched, pointing like she had just uncovered the crime of the century. Meanwhile, Tom, the farmer, had been watching the whole thing unfold from his porch. With a completely unbothered look on his face, he strolled over to the officers, hands in his pockets. "Morning, officers," he said casually. "What brings you out here? Want some fresh eggs?" The officers exchanged a look. Already this wasn't shaping up to be the serious crime scene Karen had described over the phone. One of the cops sighed, pulled out a notepad, and turned to Karen. "Ma'am, what exactly is the problem here?" Karen launched into a dramatic speech about how the farm was unsanitary, unsafe, and illegal. She listed every complaint she had: the smell, the noise, the livestock, the decreasing property values. She even threw in something about public health concerns, as if the farm was about to cause an outbreak of some unknown disease. The officers listened patiently, then turned to Tom. "Sir, do you have permits for your livestock?" Tom didn't even blink. "Of course." He pulled out a thick folder from a nearby workbench, handing it over like he had been expecting this nonsense. Business license, zoning permits, health inspection reports, everything was in order. One of the officers flipped through the papers, nodding. "Yep, this all checks out." Karen's face turned red. "That can't be right. I'm sure there's something illegal here. You have to look harder." The other officer shook his head. "Ma'am, this is a legally operating farm. Everything here is up to code." Karen's entire body tensed up. She wasn't getting the reaction she wanted. The farm was supposed to be shut down. She was supposed to win. But instead, the cops were taking his side. And that's when she lost it. She started screaming about disrespect and incompetence. She demanded they do their job and start confiscating animals immediately. When the officers told her, for the last time, that the farm was 100% legal, she switched tactics. "Oh, I see what this is," she hissed. "You're all in on it. He must be bribing you. That's why you won't listen to me." At that, the officers' patience ran out. One of them stepped forward, arms crossed. "Ma'am, you just made a false police report. That is a serious offense." Karen's mouth snapped shut. The other officer nodded. "Next time you call us for nonsense like this, you'll be the one in trouble." Karen's face drained of color. She had never considered that she could be the one facing consequences. Without another word, the officers turned and left. Tom watched them go, then turned back to Karen, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. "Well, that was fun. You want some eggs now, or are we done here?" Karen let out a strangled noise, spun on her heel, and stormed back into her house. But even though she had just been humiliated in front of the entire neighborhood, she wasn't done yet. Because if the cops weren't going to help her, she was going to take matters into her own hands. Karen had been embarrassed, but she wasn't the type to back down. If the police wouldn't help her, she'd just have to take things further. She turned to the one place where she was sure she had power: the HOA board. She showed up at the next meeting with a list of complaints, a printed-out petition, and enough fake outrage to fuel a reality TV show. We need to take action. This farm is ruining our neighborhood. It's disgusting, it's noisy, and it's killing our property values. The board members stared at her, unimpressed. One of them sighed. Karen, we've been over this. The farm is not part of the HOA. We have no authority over it. Karen refused to accept that answer. If the HOA wouldn't officially do something, she'd just have to handle it herself. And that's when she really went off the rails. She started harassing the farmer daily. She'd walk by the property just to glare at it, mumbling about the disgusting mess. She filed noise complaints about non-stop animal sounds, even though the farm had been there long before she moved in. She even tried to start a petition to remove the farm, which got her exactly 3 signatures, one of which was her own. At first, Tom tried to ignore her. He figured she'd get bored eventually. But when he caught her trespassing on his land, trying to take evidence photos to send to the city, he decided he'd had enough. So he flipped the script. The next time Karen came snooping around, Tom was ready. He had his phone out, recording as she marched up to his fence, snapping pictures like some kind of self-appointed investigator. He didn't say a word. He just let her dig her own grave. Then, he did exactly what she had done to him. He filed a report. He reported Karen for harassment, false complaints, and trespassing. And this time, when the police showed up, they weren't there to check on the farm. They were there for Karen. When she saw the officers at her door, her confidence vanished. "Oh, officers, are you finally here to do something about that horrible farm?" One of them crossed his arms. "No, ma'am. We're here because you've been reported for harassment." Karen froze. "What? That's ridiculous. I'm the victim here." But then Tom showed them the videos. Clear footage of Karen walking onto his property, taking pictures, muttering complaints about how she was going to get rid of this mess. The officers gave her a formal warning. They told her that if she kept this up, she'd be facing trespassing charges. If she filed another false report, she'd be the one in legal trouble. Karen was stunned. How was this happening? How was she the bad guy in this situation? But instead of backing off, she did what every entitled person does when they're losing. She doubled down. She decided to sue, her claim, that the farm was disturbing the peace and creating an unlivable environment. She was sure that a judge would see things her way and force Tom to shut down. What actually happened was much funnier. The case barely made it past the first hearing before the judge shut it down completely. The moment he saw the complaint, he sighed. "Ma'am, this farm has been legally operating for years. You chose to move next to it. If you don't like it, that's your problem." Karen, still refusing to accept reality, argued. She went on a rant about how the farm was a nuisance, how the HOA should have control, how the animals were violating her right to peace. The judge just shook his head. Then, he hit her with a fine for wasting the court's time. Karen sat there, stunned, as the ruling was made official. She hadn't just lost. She had paid money to be humiliated in front of a courtroom. And as she left the courthouse, still fuming, she spotted Tom leaning against his truck, arms crossed, smirking. "Hey, Karen," he called out. "You sure you don't want some fresh eggs?" Karen let out a frustrated screech and stormed away. But this time, she finally got the message. Karen thought she had hit rock bottom after losing in court, but karma wasn't done with her yet. The HOA, the same group she had tried to rally against the farm, was now fed up with her. Her constant complaints, police calls, and legal drama had brought nothing but bad attention to the neighborhood. So, in a twist of irony, the HOA fined her for disrupting community harmony. But that was just the beginning of her downfall. Her neighbors turned against her. The same people she had tried to convince to fight the farm were now avoiding her like the plague. People whispered about her at HOA meetings, Parents pulled their kids away when she walked by. She wasn't the queen of the neighborhood anymore. She was the town joke. And then came the best part. After months of humiliation, Karen decided to move. She listed her house, thinking she could escape and start over somewhere without dirty farms ruining her life. But there was one big problem. Nobody wanted to buy it. Every time a potential buyer came to check out the house, they took one look at the farm next door and backed out. The very thing she had spent months complaining about had destroyed her own home value. The irony was so perfect, it was almost poetic. And then, one day, after months of sitting on an unsold house, she was gone. She packed up, left town, and just like that, Karen was nothing but a bad memory. As she drove away for the last time, she glanced in her rearview mirror at the farm that had ruined her life. And standing there, right at the fence, was Tom. With the biggest grin on his face, he raised a hand and waved. "Bye, Karen. Don't let the farmhouse door hit you on the way out." And that, my friends, is why you never mess with a farm, especially when the farm has receipts.